Hey everybody, I'm Nicholas Snow, and this is the premiere of Hot in Palm Springs on the PromoHomo.TV network, which in the last week and a half or so has expanded into a full-fledged broadcast network with 5 unique programs distributed across a variety of social media platforms live. And this has been something that I've been wanting to do for years. And many of you already know me, especially in my hometown of Palm Springs, as someone that's generally out and about covering our most significant events, sometimes trivial, sometimes historical, sometimes gut wrenching, you name it. We're in this community together, and I frankly, it would have been remiss of me not to have a show that was specifically focused on our community, spotlighting news and views relevant not only to Palm Springs but the greater Coachella Valley and those that love to visit us. We're in a changing world, and I think we're all navigating through it. One of the focuses of my show is connecting the circuitry of humanity, and focused in my show today, I'm going to be having Alexis Ortega, and she is with the LGBT Community Center of the Desert, and they are all about creating vibrant community. And actually, their entire mission statement is creating vibrant community by helping LGBTQ people along their way. So, Alexis is coming up in just a moment or two. And actually, now she's going by Lex, but I've known her for years as Alexis, but now I'm going to start using her chosen name of Lex. We'll get into that as well in the interview. At any rate, she's coming up, but if you're watching live, I want you to let you know that we can take your viewer comments and put them on the screen. And as a matter of fact, I have Jack Bunting, who says, "Oh my God, I love this background." So, Jack Bunting is the PR guru with the Desert AIDS Project, and I am a grateful client of Desert AIDS Project and actually broadcasting from my bedroom in my affordable housing unit as part of the complex associated with the Desert AIDS Project. So, it may look like I'm sitting out on the windmill farm with a microphone, but I'm actually in a wonderful, comfortable apartment with solar energy, even. At any rate, if you're watching live, please comment, send your love to Lex. Tell me what you want and need from this show as we serve the community. At any rate, Lex Ortega was born and raised in Palm Springs. As the first in their family to attend college, Lex was heavily involved in campus LGBT groups at Stanford University. And during their senior year, they volunteered for the Obama campaign and the No on Prop 8 campaign. Shortly after Prop 8 passed, Lex helped organize National Marriage Boycott, a student-led movement of allies, a student-led movement of allies and LGBTQ people that pledged not to marry until full federal marriage equality became the law of the land. Lex returned to the desert shortly after graduation and has continued their passion for LGBTQ causes as previous member on the Harvey Milk Diversity Breakfast Committee, a volunteer and organizer of Palm Springs Dyke March, which, by the way, I have telecast live, and an organizer of social events for younger local lesbians and queer women. Lex is past president of Leadership Coachella Valley and joined the team at the LGBT Community Center of the Desert in September 2016. Lex currently serves as the secretary on La Mesa for Alianza Coachella Valley. Lex strives to be an out visible queer professional of color in the valley, and frankly, she succeeds in doing that. And I'm going to be back with Lex after just a second because I'm the producer, the director, the host, everything. Oh, by the way, I'm very happy that excuse me. Oh, bear with me. I'm not. All right. Thank you. That reminds me, I want to say that I'm distributing this show in partnership with hashtag I Love Gay, hashtag I love gay Palm Springs, and Gay Desert Guide. And I really couldn't be more happy with that. So I'll be back with Lex after this. My show goes across local social media, and anyone that follows local social media knows that Lex has had a bit of reluctant fame this week, and we're going to learn more about it. Welcome to the show, Lex.
Hi, Nicholas.
I've known you for so many years. When did you start at Desert AIDS Project as an intern?
Yeah, that was right after I graduated from Stanford and came back. So I graduated in 2009. So it was like the last month of 2009.
So I have known you for 11 years.
Yeah, wow.
Time flies. So
It really does.
So, Gay Desert Guide, my media partner here with Palm Springs, has this really fun feature. They have Crush Monday. I don't know if they referred to the day of the week in your Woman Crush feature, but they put you out this week on social media as their Woman Crush.
Right.
How did that feel?
Uh, um, I, I, I'm reluctant because I feel like there's a lot of people that don't get a lot of attention, and for whatever reason, I can be a person that people go to for things like that. And I know that there's a lot of folks in the desert, in the valley, who are doing great things, and for whatever reason, they're not getting attention that they deserve. So whenever I can take a step back, I try to. And I wanted to also help out my friend Shankar, who I adore. So that's sort of why I was a little bit reluctant. Like, I have enough attention. I'm on this show today, right? So let's give some
And
thought to other people.
it's coincidental that you were booked on the show at the same time you were the Woman Crush, but your publicist is working overtime. And I'm kidding because based upon what you just said, and it's very heart. I feel it in my heart because one of the things that I believe I heard it in a webinar of activists about the no, it was a part of the moderator's guidelines for a group that I was participating in, and they said something like "step forward, move forward, step back," and their whole notion was that if you're in a group and you're the kind of person to share all the time and other people haven't shared, step back. That's something I need to learn because I can share a lot, and that's one of the ways that I actually protected myself when I was being bullied growing up. I learned to be a stellar communicator out of being bullied. So we all have different motivations for the way we show up in the world, but equity is important, and there are people, for whatever reason, they don't have the spotlight. And one of the things that you're passionate about in your work is inclusivity and empowerment. And speak a little bit about that notion in terms of how it impacts you not only personally, but in your work for the center.
Yeah. So one, thank you for sharing what your experience has been with regards to like attention and communicating. I'll just briefly share for me, as a person that grew up in a family with addiction, I feel I can reflect back on my youth and recognize that a lot of things that I did were to receive praise, because I just wanted that praise from my family, right? And so praise feels good, attention feels good. And, part of like for me growing into adulthood and showing up in the world in the way that I want to is to recognize that those things are coping mechanisms and how do I move beyond them, right? And so part of that is, when folks come to me to like want to speak or do things publicly, how can I bring other folks along with me? Because I don't like, there's this idea of like, what does it mean to just be a charismatic leader, right? And charismatic leaders are great. And we need more people along and getting praise and getting attention, not just one individual or one person. And so that's sort of where I'm at in life right now, right? How do we make more space and shine the spotlight on folks so if they're telling their own story, that they're telling their own truth, and people, community members, whether they're part of the LGBTQ community or not, that their stories and their needs are seen, are heard, and are valued. And that requires me to get out of the way. And I would encourage anyone who is a visible person in the LGBTQ community, how can we get out of the way? And more importantly, how can we support folks, right? It's not just about getting out of the way, it's also about being there as a mentor, being there as a guide. And when I say being there as a mentor, I also mean like learning, right? I consider myself a mentor in the way that I can share experiences with someone, but more importantly, I'm also learning when I'm in relationship to other people, whether that's younger people, whether that's folks that might not have as much experience or like professionalism. And I think that's what a meaningful relationship is. So me doing that personally, but trying to do that also with my work at the LGBT Center.
That's really spectacular. For the viewers that may want to have put a question or comment forward in your social media when the broadcast is live, if you make a comment, I can put it on the screen like this. At the top of the show, Jack Bunting commented that he loves this particular background, and I do want this to be an interactive show when we are live. Alexis, so I have been doing a deep dive into my own connection to systemic racism. I've been studying more about microaggressions. I have been doing my best to amplify Black voices. I have often worked to amplify voices of people different than I am. And my heart hurts at my new awareness of what people have been going through. And one of my own rude awakenings is in decades of activism, I always felt like on the front lines of LGBTQ activism, I was by proxy involved in everybody's fight. And I realized, oh no, I was fighting a particular fight and I was fighting that with people, but at the same time, many of these people that were help fighting for my rights were in a terrible position and still are regarding their own. So these are some of my insights. And I think the first time I learned the word intersectionality was from you. It was in an interview I did with you right before a vigil that the center organized on the second anniversary of the Pulse massacre.
Right.
So I was wondering if you would speak to the notion of intersectionality and make this a teachable moment for our viewers.
Yeah, I appreciate your thoughtfulness about investigating sort of your own history and how you've shown up in spaces and how you can continue to show up better in spaces. Intersectionality is a term that's been around for a while. I believe it was Kimberly Crenshaw who sort of put forth that term, or at least my understanding, right? And I'm also maybe wrong. So if folks are watching and they know a more robust history of that term, please educate me, and I'll probably look it up after this. But it's really about this phenomenon that us as human beings, we live varied lives, and with the multiple identities that we hold, those things intersect and layer in different ways for different people. So, for LGBTQ people, we can have a variety of identities and things that affect our lives, whether that's class, whether that's race, whether that's citizenship status, whether that's physical ability. So all of these things become ways in which we exist in the world. And none are like more important or less important than another. But being aware of the fact that our identities really affect like how we feel things in the world. I'll say a quote that I heard last week from a person that I really admire, Margarita Luna, who said, right now we're facing a natural disaster, right? This is a pandemic, but the ways that it is felt is structural. And what she meant by that was there are certain reasons why certain people are feeling the effects of COVID and the pandemic in specific ways. Whether that's because they're in jobs where they can't work from home, right? They're literally the front lines people. And when I say that, I don't mean the medical folks. I mean folks who have to go to work in stores or restaurants because they need to pay their rent, because they don't have access to health insurance without it, right? And they're literally putting themselves at risk. And I think sometimes we can think that the reason why they're in those jobs is because maybe they didn't perform well in school, or that they don't have like whatever they might need to get a certain type of job, like myself, where I can work from home, right? That's a privilege. And the reality is that in the United States, this is a country on which white supremacy was built, on which capitalism has flourished. And so there's a reason why people who are most impacted by COVID are often Black and Brown people. There's a reason why people who experience poverty are Black and Brown people, amongst other people, of course. But these things are like really structural and part of these greater systems. And oftentimes we don't know that we're part of these systems until we know. So all of that is tied in together. And these are really complex conversations to have. But hopefully for folks that haven't really thought about that in this way, there's a lot of great resources that are out there to kind of like expand our world and expand our knowledge.
Well, the center does such a good job of expanding people's consciousness, and um, I I don't want to forget to talk about this, but I have some very historic footage related to the work of the center. For example, I broadcast the grand opening of the new building live. That exists in my archives. I broadcast, I wish I hadn't needed to broadcast it, but the spontaneous community gathering after the Pulse massacre, the 1 year anniversary. So uh, I am honored that I could do my own small part to capture just an ounce of what the center is doing, but speak to the broader mission and activities of the center, but also how you have specifically adapted as an organization to not only serve the existing communities that you serve, but to reach out and really mine the communities for information about their needs and to rise to meet those needs.
Definitely. So, you set our mission at the beginning of this, which is creating vibrant community by helping LGBTQ people along their way. And what we mean by that is just this understanding that as a community, we are not monolithic, right? We are not all the same. We have a variety of different experiences, whether that's because of intersectionality or whether that's because we're in different stages of our relationship to our queerness or our LGBTQ identity. There's folks who aren't yet out to themselves, sometimes not out to their family members. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have folks who have been out for decades. And so that helping people along their way, it just really recognizes that we might be at a variety of different places on this spectrum. And what the center really strives to do is to help people, no matter where they might be on that spectrum, to enrich their life, to provide support, to provide connections to other people, to community, to resources. We have three primary initiatives. So the first is ending isolation and loneliness. We know that that's really crucial. That was crucial before COVID and during COVID, even more so. The second one is connecting people to resources and community. As a community center, that's one of our strengths. And then the last one is enriching our individual and collective experience. I'm a big fan of moments of collective joy, moments of collective vulnerability. And I believe that those things create meaningful connection that's inspired by a value, a principle from another organization that I really admire, which is California Conference for Equality and Justice out of Long Beach. So that's what we mean when we say helping LGBTQ people along their way. And during COVID, we really had to move from a community center with a physical building and also programming that happened outside of that physical building to how do we create these or move these what were physical spaces and physical groups to an online space. And so I think within a week of the closing, we had new programming on Zoom. So every Monday and every Tuesday, we have sort of like community check-in chats with myself and our director of behavioral health, Jill Hingston. And that's open for anyone who just needs to speak out loud things that might be happening in their lives. And then as each week progresses, as each month progresses, we've been able to reignite programming that we might have had in the physical building. Like conversational Spanish, right? We haven't had that in a few months, and that will be starting in, I believe, next week.
You're also going to be doing, you have been doing specific Zoom meetings focused for a safe space for members of the Black community or African American community, however they choose, whatever term they use for themselves, because
Right.
many use different terms, and then other people that do not fall into that category that want to know what they can do to be part of the solutions and to define their own role in the problems. So you've really taken the initiative on creating spaces for this sort of consciousness raising.
Yeah, the center historically and even currently to some extent is a predominantly white institution. And that's not exclusive to the center. Many LGBTQ organizations in the Coachella Valley and specifically in Palm Springs are predominantly white. And there's a reason for that, right? Palm Springs is getting a lot more expensive. There's a lot of folks moving from larger metropolitan areas who can afford these $1 million homes, more than $500,000 homes, right? I was born and raised here, so if I can't afford my rent, I can go to Cat City and live with my dad, or go to La Quinta and live with my mom. And so as a predominantly white institution, right, we have a responsibility and have always had a responsibility, but in this specific moment, really stepping up our responsibility to our Black neighbors, friends, family, and also to our white community and non-Black community of folks who might be struggling, right? No one, like even myself, I consider myself pretty educated about issues with regards to race. I'm really passionate about it, and I know that I'm not an expert, right? And sometimes it can be scary to talk about these things, but I have a duty to talk about them, even when it's not easy. And I also have a duty to the rest of my community, in my perspective, to hold space for people, to help them along their way as they deal with these issues internally and externally. And so, doing that by inviting people to really have these conversations is important. And also understanding that, I'm not Black, I don't identify as Black, and how can we help support spaces where Black folks can heal, right? Because uprisings and things related to police violence affect Black people in a really specific way. And so I want to shout out Lorenzo Taylor, who is a facilitator with the center. He's facilitated Games, Friends, and Fun back when we were open, and he's done a couple online for Zoom. And he sort of raised his hand and said, I'm really interested in this. I'd be willing to facilitate. And so he had the first one specifically for Black LGBTQ folks a couple days ago. And so how can we continue to step up and show up, and also do the work as an organization to really look at our policies, to look at our culture, and to be really critical and thoughtful about moving towards a space where we're doing that work internally. And then, of course, amplifying efforts that are already happening, right? Brothers of the Desert has existed for, I think, a couple of years now, and making sure that folks know about them, that folks are committed to them, because it's a Black run org for Black people. And so making sure that they have the visibility that they need, and how can we support them, and how can we amplify what they're doing and really follow their lead.
I acknowledge that I need to be in the student's seat around these issues. But because of this platform, I've gone out of my way to have these types of conversations in my first week of programming. So, one of my archival extra episodes of the week is I interview Ron Oden, the first openly gay African American mayor elected to that office in the United States of America. And then I have an episode called All Black Lives Matter, featuring Blossom C. Brown, the trans activist that became known and beloved from the season 1 of I Am Kate, and has done a lot of really important things. And I'm very grateful to you for being on the show to speak to these issues in a different way with your own perspective. I do have a pretty complicated question here. I'm putting it on the screen. You should be able to see it.
Yeah.
Patrick Weiss says intersectionality has helped piggyback on many movements, but there seems to be a hierarchy of who and what minority groups are privileged and not. The past Chicago Dyke March, where lesbian Jews were not allowed to have a rainbow flag with Star of David, so Jews and Asians have been considered privileged in some intersectional groups. Can you speak to this and explain where you stand on it?
Wow, just throwing it right out there, Patrick. These are complicated issues, and I know some of what Patrick's mentioning, and I think we all come with different understandings of race, right? The understanding of race that I have is that race is a social construct, right? There's no biological basis for race. We have visually different skin color because of melanin and the phenotypes that, come out from our DNA, but there's no deep biological basis for a difference amongst race. And we know that race is a concept that has real implications on people in our society. And those two things can seem like they're at odds, but we have to hold both of those truths. And so different people have different experiences of what race is and what it means and who's more privileged and who's not. Um, and I can't really, I'm not an expert, right? All I can do is just share what knowledge I have and encourage folks to listen to voices that are scholars and who have lived experience of what their own background is and what their relationship is to privilege. With regards to the issue for Jewish folks and Jewish LGBTQ folks, I'm not Jewish. I have little exposure to Jewish culture. And I know that there has been a lot of work that's been happening with regards to Israel and Palestine, right? And words being thrown out like apartheid and other things like that. And I don't really have that knowledge, but I know that there are folks that are on the ground working. I I can't say that, you know, like these are the types of conversations that I don't think can just happen on a show like this, right? We're talking
Sure.
about centuries,
Yes.
centuries of like really deep rooted issues. And I know that when we're talking at each other, we aren't, there's not a lot of space to like listen for understanding and where folks are coming from. So
Do you feel that these conversations are happening at a higher level in a way they haven't before?
I feel like I've seen these conversations happening, amongst certain groups of people. I think there's more of an awareness now that these conversations have been happening, but none of this is new, right? Patrick referenced the Chicago Dyke March that I think was last year, maybe 2 years ago. These conversations are not new. Folks have been having these conversations. I think there is like a heightened level of awareness that these conversations have been happening. It's kind of like what it reminds me of is, when we talk about policing and folks who are hearing calls for wanting policing to move in a different direction, and people say, oh well, I didn't hear anyone having any issues about this, 6 months ago. And the reality is that people have always had issues with policing. It's just that folks weren't paying attention. Or maybe it wasn't, as you mentioned, on people's consciousness. But to say that these conversations haven't happened or that this is all new, like that's not true.
I don't think that they're new at all, but I'm having these conversations in a way I never have before.
Right.
So the horrible convergence of events in our world have helped me identify my own bubble
Right. And
and my
that's what privilege does, right? Privilege protects us from the necessity of having these conversations.
right, which is it's a hard pill to swallow, but I'm swallowing it and I want to be part of the solution. So that I'm committed to that. I want to get into one other topic and then open it up for anything you feel that we may not have addressed in the interview. So I've interviewed lots of people who identify in different elements of the transgender spectrum. And I've learned enough to know that gender identity ultimately, and you can disagree with me if you want to at anything that I summarize, but I have come to understand that gender identity is ultimately based upon who an individual knows and declares themselves to be. It has to do with who they know themselves to be, who they declare themselves to be, who do they discover themselves to be, and who they choose to be. As a result of all of that, it doesn't it's not based upon someone's appearance, it's not based upon someone's biology, it's not based upon someone's sexual orientation. It's different and apart from those things. Does that summary sound true to you? And if not, how would you change it? And because I have something else I want to add to it after we kind of break that down.
Yeah, you're throwing out all the good questions, Nicholas. Yeah, I gender and gender identity. The way that I like to view it is a complete spectrum, right? And different folks have different relationships to definitions of what those things are. For me personally, I think it's really limiting to think about the world and think about these complex issues in binary ways, like either this or either that. Um, you know, I look to folks that I've learned from. So looking to trans folks themselves, I don't identify as trans. In fact, my own relationship to gender is something that I'm very much still swimming in right now, right? And then I look to folks who are doing this work right now. There's a gender therapist locally in the desert. Their name is Mare Abrams. And I've seen them present on a specific framework and thinking about gender that really resonated with me, right? And I continue to learn and consume content and hear folks from their personal experience. And all I can really do is like take that in and then really think about my own relationship to gender identity, presentation. I do personally believe that all of gender is sort of a performance, just as all parts of our identity are performances. Like we're performing on some level who we think we are, especially when there are other folks external witnessing that. So yeah, that's all that I can really say,
Well,
really say
oh,
right
okay.
now.
Would you agree with this statement? Because I want to sort of tell on myself about something. Would you agree that you cannot necessarily know someone's gender identity by looking at them?
Oh yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Okay. All right.
I'm
So
I'm I'm moving to a place where, I'm moving away from pronouns of he and she when I encounter people like, just new. I'm trying to move to a place where I'm normalizing saying, what pronouns do you use? Right. Um,
that's perfect, Alexis, because that's what I wanted to share. So, you can see under my name it says he, him, and his.
yeah.
I've never put my pronouns out there, but I had a huge aha revelation about this just this week because I it occurred to me, all right, if I asked someone who is gender fluid, they self-identify as gender fluid. And I sent them a private message in a town hall session. And I said, when is it appropriate to ask someone what their pronouns are? And their response was, see, I'm learning. Their response was always. And I started to think about that. And then I had this aha moment that, okay, there might be someone who takes offense when I ask them what their what their pronouns are because of their stuff. But by asking, I help expand awareness and consciousness. And that is a huge part of the solution is for us to ask, honor, recognize that choice in others without making assumptions that are based on constructs.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I always go back to this truth that I know to be true, right? Which is, as an LGBTQ community, we're not monolithic. We're not all the same. We have differences of opinions. And so there might be folks who are trans or who are gender non-binary who might not appreciate that question for whatever reason, right? And for me, I think recognizing and respecting when folks are there, but also like there's a lot of other folks that don't have that education, and who have the privilege of not having to think about gender or their gender identity or their gender presentation. And so, expanding their awareness and starting to think critically about this for themselves.
Have you had an experience where you wanted to honor someone's choices and so you asked them what their preferred pronouns were and they took offense?
I haven't, but it would be naive of me to assume that folks like that don't exist.
No, I'm sure they do. I'm sure
Yeah,
they do.
yeah. And I
I
usually
had
try to just ask, what pronouns do you use?
okay.
And my experience has always been thus far, appreciation for just asking that question.
Fantastic. For our audience, I just want to let you know that the reason, even though Lex does not identify as trans, they are very much involved in these conversations in their work with the center. And I know, Lex, that you have adopted your pronouns have evolved a little bit from when
Yeah,
I met you.
yeah,
So I wanted to explore that with you. And I just want to thank you. I'm honored that not only would you allow me to have this conversation with you, that you're having it at such a public level, but I want to thank you because I think this is all very helpful.
yeah. Well,
And,
hopefully
well, we'll see.
it can be a lot. um, and I might make mistakes, and that's okay.
You mean you're human?
Right? Yeah, I have a very um, complicated relationship with perfectionism, so I'm trying to like push back that.
I do too. I have to say, I meant to make this point earlier. Often when I'm interviewing Mike Thompson, the CEO of the center, or other people from the center, as I set up the interview, I'll say that one of the center's key missions is to combat chronic isolation and loneliness. And I tell the truth that I have the propensity to isolate and to be alone and lonely. And I'm basically afraid of people, which I would imagine most people would find an astounding piece of information about me. And through my own recovery journey, dealing with addiction in my own past and in my own life, in my own experience and my own recovery, I'm a work in progress. But what I do know about this and other issues, that if we come to know and express the truth about our lives to the people whom we influence, then we create transformation. It doesn't mean that our truth is the truth, but it's in our sharing of truths where we elevate the conversation and hopefully we all learn as part of the process.
Yeah, totally. Shout out to like my 12 step spaces too, to like get me to a point of like thinking about like progress, not perfection. And I really, really try to like live that these days. But with regards to like my relationship to my gender identity and gender presentation, like we have access to different language, right? And I'm trying to really explore. And like I learned from Mayor when they did their presentation, what is it like to like play, right? Be playful with gender. I When I was born, I was assigned female at birth, and I know that my experience of gender for much of my life has been like really masculine presenting. I've had a few moments in my life where I went hyper feminine. I think probably when I reflect back on it now, because of fear, because of wanting to be accepted. And when I actually really think about it, I've often just been drawn to kind of sort of the middle or more masculine presenting. And I think that's probably why when I was going through coming to understand my sexual orientation, why I really settled on the term queer, because that just felt more liberating to me, right? Straight up. And I know that I've identified as L, as G, as B at different points in my life. But for the past, I would say maybe 12 years, queer is a word that just feels like it sits right in my heart. And so it's really liberating to now begin to explore gender and what that looks like for me. And I'm not at the point right now where I say, oh, I'm identifying as, non-binary, though I keep looking towards that term, um, because there's something curious and like that I'm drawn to about that. But one of the easiest things that I've been able to do is transition from using my full name, which is Alexis, to my nickname Lex, and that name is what I was called all throughout childhood. I have a brother named Alex. My name's Alexis, and I have a sister named Alyssa. And when we were growing up, my name in my family, in my household, was Lex, and I've always just loved that name to refer to me. It's always felt like home to me. And so to be able to do that now with intention and, get an email address that says Lex at the center ps.org, or to be able to put that in my signature, there's something like really freeing about that, and also like something really nerve-wracking about that, right? And at the end of the day, like my name on all my documents is Alexis, and I still love that name, but Lex just has always felt like, oh, this feels comfortable, this feels like me. And then the next step beyond that is like, okay, what is it like to refer to myself with they pronouns, they them pronouns. So I'm figuring it out. And I would encourage other folks to really just spend some time getting to know yourself. I'm 33, and I feel like I'm barely getting to a place where I know myself and explore different parts of my identity that maybe I felt like I didn't have an opportunity to before.
Well, I'm so honored that you've shared so much of who you are with us today. I want to let you have a final remark, but I want to share with you and with the viewers that coming up on Hot in Palm Springs on PromoHomo.TV. Later today, I'm going to be speaking with Willie Ryan, owner of 849, about what it's been like as a restaurant owner to navigate the pandemic. And next week, I'm welcoming Brad Furr, who's the publisher of Gay Desert Guide, the media partner with Hot in Palm Springs. And then later on next week, I'm featuring the Women of the L Fund.
Yay.
And this is an example of the shows coming up on Hot in Palm Springs. There are 5 shows on PromoHomo.TV. Go to PromoHomo.TV and go into the About section, and you can find about all of the shows and how to submit guests and topics for the shows. So, Alexis, thank you again. Do you have any final remarks about today's interview or anything?
Um, I guess I just appreciate, Nicholas, you being vulnerable and sharing, um, you know, the your intentions about learning. Um, I try to remind folks that um, we can't always have it all right. We will make mistakes, and I think I like saying those things because it's a reminder to myself. Right? I alluded to this like relationship with perfectionism, so like having these conversations can be really difficult, can be stressful, and they're crucial for us to get to a point where every single person it can really celebrate the full expression of their complete authentic selves. And you will hear Mike Thompson say that too, and I really believe that as well. So I appreciate the moments that I've had to share with you, talking about really hard topics. And um, you know, I think I think how I show up in this space is also how I try to show up in my work at the center and just as a human being, right? Listening to understand, trying to create meaningful connections and have space to really hear folks out on what their experience is.
Well, our community is a much better place because you're a part of it and you're helping to lead it. And I want to thank you for being on the world premiere of Hot in Palm Springs.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
And please come on the show anytime. I'm a proud media partner of the center.
Yes. Thank you.
Have a great day. Give my love to all your colleagues.
All right.
So I've been talking with Alexis Ortega. She's an amazing. They are an amazing human being, and I am still learning. And I just want to thank you all for watching, and I appreciate it. And I will see you next time.